Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you've been watching Business Morning on Channels Television, broadcasting from Lagos. We've been looking at corporate social responsibility before we went on break, and now we will be shifting our focus to state agricultural development. And to take us through this topic is the Commissioner for Agriculture in Ogun State. She is Ibirunke Shokefun. Good morning, ma'am, and thank you for coming on the program. We appreciate your time with us. Agriculture is an ongoing thing in the country. We've seen the way the federal government is taking it up upon itself to ensure that agriculture continues to grow, and the contribution to our country's GDP is quite remarkable. Looking at the state's involvement in agriculture, how would you describe what they're doing generally to develop agriculture in the country?
Again, thank you for having me. We as state governments, we look to support the federal government's ATA program, which is the Agricultural Transformation Agenda program, and also create our own state's policies around that ATA. For the ATA, as you've heard the minister say several times, it's about increasing local content in everything we produce. For instance, he's gone on and on about cassava flour, and therefore there's an impetus on state governments to boost the production of cassava to at least get that high quality cassava flour that's used for the production of pastry. And like I said, apart from that, each state government then hones in on its own agricultural program or agenda in creating specific policies around production. For instance, with my state government, our third cardinal program is increased agricultural production to lead to industrialization. Therefore, we're not focused on just bringing industries into Ogun State. We're looking to these industries doing their backward integration also in Ogun State, meaning you, for instance, are into cassava flour production. We don't want you scouting around maybe states in the southwest or even up to the north looking for cassava. We're saying grow your cassava locally in this enclave. We will give you the land to support it and also the farmers to support that initiative. So that's what we as the state government are doing. But generally, I know that all the state governments, because we have a National Council on Agriculture meeting we hosted in Ogun State in June this year, and that council is essentially the Honorable Minister and the 36 States Commissioners for Agriculture. It's a big event. That's where we do policy formulation for the coming year. First, we review what we've done for the current year and then formulate policies for the following year. So it's clear that you should not ideally deviate from what it is you agreed to there, but your state's policies must be focused on achieving those initiatives.
Okay, talking about policies now.
Yes.
How is the state government now, because I want us to really concentrate on state government involvement in agriculture. What policies, or because I'm just wondering, how do the state government drive agriculture development with policies, and what policies have been put in place by these state governments?
Okay, like I said to you, those policies differ from state to state, again depending on the focus. We, for instance, are focused on increasing production. How do you do that? It comes in different forms. It's either by getting more investors into the state to come and do their farming through land allocation, supporting farmers through land clearing, which we currently do. We bought land clearing equipment, rolled them out onto uncleared land. We started clearing massively and bringing in farmers onto the land that we've cleared, supporting them through timely procurement of fertilizers for their use. We're also looking into irrigation, for instance, to say, you know what, instead of having farming activities revolve around weather, why don't we improvise? Why don't we do irrigation such that there can be all-year farming? You do that as well. You can also support these farmers through improved seedlings. You partner with your NIHOTs, IITs to get improved varieties of crops and then distribute to these farmers so they can plant them to increase their yield. I give you an instance. Currently, we're recording 17 metric tons per hectare of cassava, but our target is actually 25. And therefore, we've gotten a yield from IITA that we have planted, and the sole aim of that plantation is to be able to replicate that yield to the farmers across the state. So your policies, as I've said severally, must be clear, they must be concise, and they must be tied to your own agricultural initiatives for your for your state government.
Let's look at the issue of local content, which I think you've mentioned part of it while we're doing this conversation. In terms of local content, how often what kind of breed do you bring into your agricultural scheme? Because apart from cassava and rice, because you want to expand your horizon and see how you can take advantage of all the products, perhaps that do not really grow in your place. So how do you take advantage of all of this, and how do you incorporate it into your scheme?
You can have comparative strength across board. That's related to produce. And therefore, you must know what your soil can do. Speaking to rice and cassava, our land in Ogun State, in some parts of the state, support rice production. We are, for instance, partnering with a neighboring state government. We've given them land. They come into our state to plant, and then they will take their produce out. With respect to cassava, cassava does well in practically all the areas of the state. So that's is really a no-brainer. But with respect, I'll speak to tomatoes now. We're working on growing tomatoes in hydroponics, meaning a regulated environment. Again, one, we have the soil to plant tomatoes and improve our yield, but we're looking to conclude work on improved variety so that we have less cases of tomato wilt, which is prevalent when you do open field cultivation. Pending this time, we're looking to, like I said, grow them in cultured environment, which we call greenhouses. We're working with Disengolf in this regard. And we've done a pilot, which is pretty much successful, and we're rolling out in larger quantities over the next couple of months. These are expected to start fruiting after the first 4 months, and steadily from that 4 months, they fruit for 6 months. So it behoves on each state government to know where its relative strength lies. Ogun State is good for cotton, Ogun State is good for cocoa, Ogun State is good for oil palm, Ogun State is good for rice, and it's also good for cassava. That's amongst several other things. So therefore, your imperative is to latch onto those produce that you know that you have the soil for, and you can record high yield and focus on those.
Okay, I just hear you talk about having to give your land or lease your land, so to speak, to some state governments who use them and perhaps what the benefit or cultivate them. Last year, there was a summit in the South-South. It was actually Delta Beyond Oil and South-South Beyond Oil, so to speak. And one of the commissioners there that we spoke to talked about having to give out their land to perhaps neighboring states. How do you go about ensuring that what your aims are actually achieved? Because how do you create a win-win situation, so to speak? Because if another state is going to come to your state to use the land, they want to benefit from it. So how do you create that win-win situation to ensure that both parties gain from such partnership?
What would ordinarily have been uncultivated land first gets cultivated, so that's a good advantage for me. Secondly, and most importantly, they use my local farmers, and therefore I can guarantee employment. Together with other related benefits. One, for instance, land clearing. I have land clearing equipment that I lease, and so they take from me. So again, my equipment is not lying idle. I have it engaged. And like I said, they use my farmers. Their produce is attributable to my state. So you cannot continue to look at it in isolation and think, my land, my land, my land. They're just like any other investor that comes into the state. They're just like any other allottee, and we constantly have requests for land allocation. Huge companies that today realize the folly of not engaging or engaging earlier in backward integration, who are dependent on scouts combing the length and breadth of the nation, looking for produce for them to support as feed into their factories. Now such companies are coming to us and asking for thousands of hectares of land to enable them cultivate. Ultimately, they can't do it alone. They come to the state, my farmers will be busy. They'll have a lot of work to do, and instead of the little less than 1 hectare pocket of of land that they're working on. And I'd like to speak to that as well, because it is not really a disadvantage when they have those small holdings, because there are also programs to support what they're doing. But ultimately, such would now be busy because they are now farming on vast hectares of land that's been acquired by these neighboring states.
I understand that there is a free trade zone in your state.
Yes, there is.
The Olokola Free Trade Zone.
Yes.
I'd like to know, how does this actually aid agricultural development in the state?
Olokola is yet to come on stream. There's a lot of groundwork that's currently ongoing. As you jolly well know, it's not just us. It's in partnership with Ondo State. There's not going to be a lot of farming activities there. Okay. It's meant to host like a refinery because of its proximity to the ocean, so that ships can sail in, take produce or discharge as the need arises. But for us, there's also the Guangdong Free Trade Zone, which is around Igbesa, which is to the west of the state. And there we have vast hectares of land as well that some companies are already taking the benefit of by doing their farming activities there. There we intend to give out not just the pockets of your 20, 50, 100 hectares, but thousands for companies of that nature. So Olokola is not really geared towards agricultural development. We will have factories there that do processing, but a lot of it is going to be geared towards a lot of development, as in growth for cultivation will be geared towards Igbesa.